Yeah, I've gone back to the
Yeah,
basics. It's weird
yeah,
because you're all the way around and you sort of come back to these
yeah.
basics. So
I mean, so yeah, well, I mean, I hope you don't mind me going off in a bit of a direction, but actually, you're bringing up something that has been in my heart for quite a while now that I'm noticing is lacking. It's lacking in the talk online of awakening, which is just grounded, simple, mindful practice. Because
mm,
actually, what I'm finding with a lot of the people that I speak to, doing one-to-one sessions in person, that I'm communicating about awakening with, because they've come across a contemporary awakening path. So they've heard someone talk about self-inquiry, and they've started slicing at themselves, trying to cut away all this delusion. What often happens is they've not yet nurtured the skill to be with what arises. Because if you pull that lid off the bottle, a lot of things are going to come up. People don't realize that the self mechanism, and maybe this is where I can talk a bit about what awakening is. But if we start looking underneath what sits underneath the self structure, the self referential structure of mind, actually, there's a lot of conditions or emotional and physical conditioning. And if we don't have a practice to be able to be with that when it arises, it can be very, very confusing, very upsetting. Like I've spoke to people and they're talking about trying to realize, infinite Brahman Godhead, and they can't be with their thoughts for more than 5 minutes. They've not got that just simple skill of patience.
yeah,
And that's not a criticism, but I guess what it kind of points to the times, doesn't it? We've been brought up in this kind of modern hyper gratification reality. Like, I want something, I get it like this, or I can fast track it. But actually trying to get to the end before going through the, let's say, yeah, it's not a goal to achieve.
yeah,
It's a process, isn't it? It's an unfolding into life. So yeah, doing that kind of practice that you just spoke about, I think is really, really beneficial for people. It can support you so much if you know you've got the ability to be with whatever arises in the body, in the mind, just with gentle patience. That is such a strong anchor, isn't it? It's a really great foundation.
yeah. And what I've sort of been looking at over the years, really, and like I said, I've gone back to more of a practical sort of process. But whenever I have been meditating, I guess like learning to know what is just nonsense and just let that go, um, and know what is worth maybe focusing on or leaning into a little bit. So as
Yeah.
you said, the sort of things that arise, don't just go, sometimes there's things and it's like an emotion is attached to it. And
That's it.
I think
That's it.
when you get to that space where you're a bit more detached from thought,
Mm,
you can acknowledge yourself being pulled in.
yeah.
Why is it that I get this feeling in my gut when that popped up,
Yes.
and do,
Yeah.
do you mind sort of explaining sort of your experience with that? Because I think when I've said that, your eyes have lit up. What sort of advice would you give on
Oh, yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? Because I kind of because actually it's quite subtle work, isn't it? So this is why gentle, regular, mindful practice is helpful, because what it does is it allows you to notice it. And I think so. Before we even get to that stage, we need to be able to notice that's what's going on. You just described, oh, something popped up, and then there's a feeling in the pit of the stomach, and there's a thought attached to it. Actually, that's quite a lot of insight. That takes quite a lot of mindfulness. Often we don't even notice that's happening. We just find ourselves in distraction, or trying to take refuge in old habits. So often, what will happen, you could say, prior to exploring awakening, we just find ourselves smoking, drinking, trying to avoid. Doesn't have to be those things, but trying to avoid these feelings that arise naturally in life. So we don't even notice the feelings. The
Yeah,
reflex response, and it is a reflex response. We're just halfway down the track of trying to gratify ourselves, doing anything we can not to feel this. So we don't even know what the trigger was, didn't even feel the feeling in the stomach, didn't even notice the thought in the mind. We're
yeah,
just off our tits in a nightclub, as an example.
yeah,
Now, it's a little bit different if you've been practicing for a little while, which I know a lot of people listen to this probably will have. But this is why this simple mindfulness practice really helps, because actually gentle attention, focused gentle attention, like you said before, means that when these things arise, you go, oh, there is something here. I'm now noticing that thought that I usually distract myself with, there's a feeling attached to it. I mean, just that, it seems simple, but what a beautiful insight that is, isn't it? So I'm no longer a slave to this thought thinking, believing that it's just random nonsense and I've got to battle it in the mind. You're starting to see, oh, there's a process going on here and it's inviting you into the body. Wow. I mean, it's such a different order of being to just being here all of the time as a person, isn't it? So
Yeah, I think it's even like to be able to sort of isolate it, because
mm,
I know, like, say for instance, anxiety, right? Anxiety, when you're in it, it's almost like there's not a beginning or an end. It just is this thing that like wraps you up. And it
mm,
and I think for anyone that suffers from like depression or anxiety, just this, like I said, this practical method of
yeah,
doing meditation, it can allow you to almost like see it happening,
yes,
because anxiety can just be there, and all of a sudden you're wrapped up in this thing, and like I said, there was no beginning. It's just encapsulated you. So I think
mm,
just being aware of, like, one thing that I've been doing with my meditation. So I was doing a bit of the transcendental. So I had a mantra and I
yeah,
was kind of hanging on to
yeah.
that. But what I've been doing is just focus on the breathing, and then I put my attention just literally behind,
Oh yeah,
so maybe like an inch behind.
yeah.
Um, so I'm sort of like trying to focus there, and you notice your mind going. Sometimes you don't even notice it going. You're aware that you've gone,
Mm,
and then you go, right, bring it back, and then you bring
that's
it
it.
back, and then
That's it.
eventually you start to notice when it starts to go.
Yes.
And just, I think, as you say, just to be like aware that that's happening,
Yeah.
and there is no end goal. It's just bring myself back, acknowledge that I did that again, and then
Mm,
you just have this game of mind going, mind coming back, mind going, mind coming back. I
yeah.
just feel like that practically, from a practical application, it allows you in your real life, in the real world, every hour of every day, to just be aware of that
It
happening.
does. Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, this is so good to mention, Jay. Like, I think it's wonderful because this is the stuff you don't see on YouTube videos because it doesn't sell. Like the regular step by step practice training of the mind. That's not clickbait, is it?
No,
There's no happy finish. Sorry, there's no like you're gonna get the end result. It's not no. It you don't get anything out of it as such. No thing. But
yeah,
the mind and the body attention learns to be with the moment more and more intimately, like closer and closer to experience, recognizing what's going on in body, speech, thought. We get closer and closer to that. I mean, if you think about, you asked what awakening was before, you could just say freedom. You could say that. I mean, it's a bit kind of glib and a bit short, but you could say freedom to be in the world without being dragged heedlessly, mindlessly
yeah,
into either thoughts, feelings, whatever. But that freedom only comes if we can unbind to what's binding us. If you think about the opposite of freedom is like being chained, being shackled, isn't it? So how do we unchain? Well, we've got to see the chains first. So if you can't even see like the processes of mind and body that you're attached to, how can you let them go? And I think, yeah, so it's not super glamorous what you've just described, but that is a perfect example of just gently training the mind, the attention to be with experience. And like, you'll be surprised how much dividends that can bring. Like, yeah, really
yeah.
rewarding.